This is CZ 2075 Rami versus SIG P365 versus Glock G48, a comparison. I led a convoy of shooters to Banner Range first thing this morning where this video was filmed. You're going to have to contend with some background noise. We were trying to beat the heat before the range closed. And now, let's hit the range. Sweaty palms, not fun. Now the weather is mid 80s, high humidity, feels like low to mid 90s, what I call sweaty palms weather for our shoot today. Looking at our targets, the C for CZ, we really did not do very well at all, and that's definitely a combination of sweaty palms effect and just being out of touch with this firearm because I haven't fired it in months. Moving to the S for SIG target. When we got settled in, we see a group a little left of the bullseye. Pretty good group for me anyway. Merrill's good enough. Looking at the G for Glock target, we have what looks like a day where the Glock is going to perform well for us. And we think right off the bat that the extra size of the grip that's helping somewhat negate sweaty palm effect, and then the added benefit of the longer slide, better sight picture is helping us. But we'll see as the day goes on how that progresses. I've seen what feels like a higher than normal volume of Rami posts the past few weeks asking questions like how does it compare against a P365 or a Hellcat or any number of other questions. So I thought this would be a fun video. Representing the micro compact double stack 9mm class, we have the P365. Mine happens to be the SAS version. Now I also am using the Glock G48, both to represent what I'm going to call the Glock family of firearms, but also to stand in for what I'm going to call the next size up from the Rami. We're going to say the compact concealed carry class approaching full-size pistol. So I feel like this gives us a nice represent group for pistols that are slightly smaller / in the same family and the next size up slightly larger. Starting with the Rami versus the SIG, I think the numbers on paper make these firearms seem more dissimilar in size than they really are. The Rami is 6.5 inches long, 4.7 inches high, 1.3 inches wide, and weighs in at 25.9 ounces. The P365 is 5.8 inches long, 4.3 inches high, 1 inch wide, and weighs in at 17.8 ounces. Now let's do some comparison shots. Here you can see the Rami on top of the SIG, and they're basically the same size in that regard. And here the SIG on top of the Rami, again the SIG, the same size. Well, the Rami is wider in the grip, which you can see here. I've substituted my 365 380 for this shot, which does not have the hoe grip, which I think takes up that difference. With the milling on the Rami slide, we see from the top down they're very similar in the width in that regard. When using the extended magazines, we see the grip length on both firearms is again very similar. If we move on to the Glock G48 now, we see that it is longer in the slide, longer in the barrel, longer in the grip. It's, by virtue of its 7.28 inches long, 1.1 inch wide, 5.04 inches high, weighs in at 20.74 ounces. With the addition of the extended mag, the Rami grip is a lot closer in size, and with width they're very similar in width, though again, longer barrel, longer slide, different sight picture on it. And the other difference is, while in some ways the Glock feels like a larger firearm, the Rami still is the heavier firearm of the three. Now here's the difference in magazine size in case you're curious. We're also going to include the extended magazines for the CZ and the SIG, so you can see that as well. I only have a standard 10-round magazine for the G48. Now before we talk more about the firearms and their differences and similarities, how about a little more range time? I'm aiming at the wrong target. It's like the biggest daddy long legs ever. Re-examining our target, and we see that the CZ is starting to put some hits on target, doing okay at it. The SIG grouping is, well, it's performing like a SIG. It's doing pretty good. And the Glock, even though the world's largest daddy long legs, not a spider, tried to distract us, we endeavored to persevere, and our grouping looks like pretty much a carbon copy of the previous one. Funny how that works. Let's take a moment to discuss some positive and negative features of the Rami, in my opinion. In the CZ75 family of firearms, the Rami is the most concealable of those firearms by virtue of its shorter grip and the 10-round magazine that it can use. Compared to the micro-compact double-stack pistols that are popular today, the Rami does not have a rail on it that you could mount a light or a laser that some people prefer. It's also not optics ready from the factory to where you could mount a micro red dot sight on it, say like your P365, your Hellcat, your Glock G43, 48 now come, things like that. Depending on who you are, you might say this is a positive or a negative, but the Rami is also quite a bit heavier. Now in my opinion, that extra mass helps it absorb recoil a little better, though there are people that are going to say carrying it all day, that extra mass is going to make it less carryable for them. Now on the flip side, there are those people out there that are going to be a fan of a metal frame pistol over a polymer frame, for whatever their reasons may be to those people. And the Rami with its aluminum alloy frame is going to satisfy that for at least some people who want a metal that's aluminum alloy at least frame. And while it is a little wider than say your P365, your Hellcat, these style micro compact double stacks, one advantage of that extra width is that being in the CZ75 family, it can use this full-size CZ75 magazines, like say your 19-round Shadow magazine, for example. Good times. Now, if there's one change I was going to make to my Rami, and I have made it to all my Ramis, in fact, is I would recommend changing out your sights, especially if you have the safety version, which typically came with just a vanilla 3-dot. I went with Dawson fiber optic front sights on mine. I think that change alone is the one thing you can do that'll make the most improvement to your experience with this firearm. I went from shooting like softball size groups to golf ball size groups, and better when I shot this all the time. Highly recommend the Dawson fiber optic front sight on the Rami. Now, like all firearms in this video and the 75 style ones, the Rami is very customizable. Here is one that I converted to single action only that also has the fiber optic Dawson front sight, some race springs on the inside, and a race hammer. Here's probably my favorite Rami, another one that's been converted to single action only that has the Dawson fiber optic front sights and a rounded trigger and some polishing on the inside and whatnot. Fantastic trigger on this Rami. It's hard to contend with even when you shoot a full-size firearm. Moving on to our P365 380. Now this is another one that I think is a very good to fantastic firearm. I happen to have the Hogue grip sleeve on that. That's mostly for my benefit. For the volume that I shoot this firearm in, that is just to help keep my hand from getting fatigued after a few magazines. If this was your concealed carry personal protection home defense firearm, I think you'd be perfectly fine going without the Hogue grip sleeve and the added width and say effect to the concealability that it has. Now as a micro compact double stack pistol, this P365, it does pack a lot of firepower into those magazines. You get 10-round magazines from manufacturer in the box. They also have SIG makes 12 15-round magazines, and we shoot the 15-round magazines in half this video or more. That's a lot in a pistol this size. You also have the SIG rail on it, so you can put the light or a laser. You have front and rear slide serrations, which they do work, though in a day like today with sweaty palms, I wish they were a little more aggressive on their serrations. You can get many versions of these that are optics cut, and some that even come with an optic like a Romeo Zero from the manufacturer. The one we're shooting today is the SIG Anti-Snag or SAS model that has the MiPro bullseye sight milled into the slide and no front sight. So you can see these guns are very customizable, and there's a plethora of different options available out there. And moving on to our G48, this is one I included to represent, as I said, larger firearms than also the Glock family of firearms. I think a lot of people, when these slimline series was announced, they wished that was a micro compact double stack instead of single stack. But I do like the size of the grip on the slimline series, which is why I happen to have the G48. I thought this model would represent sort of the 43, 48, 17, 26, 19, whatever, the various sizes of the Glock and 9mm well enough to at least represent Glock in general for our channel. Now, since purchasing this one for the channel, Glock has since come out with a optics ready version of it. Had that version been out, I would have bought that one instead of this one, and we'd probably have some Holosun videos and other ones featuring it instead of, say, just the SIG and the Hellcat. But it is what it is. It's nice that they now have that as an option. Like the SIG, it also has the front and the rear slide serrations, which I'm a fan of. Though again, on a day like today with the sweaty palm effect, I do wish they were a little more aggressive, because they really were not that easy to use when my hands were quite slick. Now that's one area where what I would call the rougher looking, less cosmetic looking serrations on the CZ were actually more of a benefit. Because they were more aggressive today, even with the sweaty palm effect, I could still easily grab those serrations. Now, similar to my CZ Rami, this G48 does not have a rail on it. With the size of this firearm, I think that's one thing where some people would probably wish it actually did have a rail. With it being close to a full-sized one, I could see it being one that people would naturally want to put, say, a light on it, in addition to, say, just a red dot. Now, before we talk about even more features we like, how about a little more range time? That was terrible. That was all me. That was terrible. Hoping to sig out on that one. Looking at our one-handed targets, we see that the CZ, well, it's actually doing pretty good at this point. The SIG, we need to subtract one donation from the CZ, and, well, I mean, it's doing okay for me. My one-handed shooting is always poor, and so I'm going to say that's good for me. And for the Glock, we need to subtract 2 donations from the SIG, so that target's actually not looking quite as good without those 2. And for me, the Glock has started strong, and well, now it's not so good. Is that sweaty palm effect? Let's come back to that. One thing I think we're seeing here is the added mass of the Rami that some people are going to say make it harder to carry. I think what we're seeing for me in this video is that over time, as we shoot it here today, it's becoming less taxing to shoot the Rami compared to the other 2 firearms, and as a result, I'm shooting it better over time compared to the other 2 where my performance is degrading. Now, to confirm this suspicion, let's go ahead and mix up the order and shoot the Glock first instead of the Rami first and see how that does with some fresh targets. Comparing our targets for the final time, we see while the SIG looks like it has a better grouping on the target, we have fewer hits on the target. With the Glock, we did okay, but again, we have fewer hits on the target. compared to what we have with the CZ, which while we have what looks more like a shotgun pattern style target, we have more hits in both the single-handed with either hand and the two-handed shooting, which I think has to do both with the extra mass that helps with the recoil, and we have my preferred style sights that I happen to shoot very well on this firearm, and they're in full bright, their preferred setting, which goes a long way as well. Well, I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.